we can have with our organizations to help the startups? Well, today, the goal of today is to work out on the ESOs, work out on ourselves, and work out on problems that our own organizations might be facing. And perhaps there are some common approaches that we can take within the region to make our work a little bit easier. So today we're going to think a little bit about, what are some of the issues that me as a community player, as an organization, what are some of the issues that I'm facing on the ground? What are some of the needs that I have and some of the problems that we're facing? So start thinking a little bit about those problems. And then what we will do now is just open up the discussion a little bit with some of the stuff that we are doing in Estonia. And just raise your hand if you've ever heard about Estonia. Yeah, now you should. Okay, now everyone should raise their hand. If you haven't raised your hand, then you weren't paying attention yesterday. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of the initiatives that are popping out from Estonia, just to inspire you a little bit. Maybe some of them could be useful for your own country or for the region, and that would serve maybe as inspiration when we go to the solutions phase. But before we get to solutions, we need to bring out the problems. So start thinking about what issues are you facing or what issues you see the community struggling with. But let's talk a little bit about Estonia. So the first thing to know, again, as we mentioned before, Estonia, very small country, 1.4 million people, so it's not very large. And it has produced a surprising number of unicorns, of this multi-billion euro companies, but also the number of startups per capita is quite high. And I think some of the issues that the teams and the companies were having there are similar throughout the different ecosystems. And what started happening there was that it wasn't so much a government-led initiative that led to some of the solutions. It was community-driven, meaning that it was the community itself that was coming up with those solutions. So let's just start here. Yes. So the startup sector is growing at around 30% per year. As of last year, so this is a little bit out of date, there's 1,100 startups. Every 98th person on the Estonian workforce is connected with startups. So that means we have a lot of new jobs being created by startups, which is great because these are numbers that can show to the government that this sector has an impact. The government loves the third point, which is startups were paying 97 million in employment taxes. A lot of the times when we talk to the government, we need to reinforce the fact that these are startups that are based locally, kept locally, and creating jobs locally, which is difficult in a small country because the tendency is always, or it used to be always, that as soon as a startup grows big enough, they shift to London or to Berlin or to the US. And now we're shifting the narrative and talking about how much in employment taxes are staying locally, which helps also with the story when we talk to the government. Their turnover was in 2020 was 78 million. I think this is also a little bit outdated numbers. And they've raised 1.8 billion in the last 12 years, 90% of them being foreign funds. So when we were talking about, I think yesterday, about the foreign money or the local money, and how angel investment might be the local money, but at some point you need the foreign money to come in. You can see that 90% of funds going into Estonian startups are foreign funds, not necessarily local funds. And that's not a bad thing, because that's one way to attract investment and to get the sector to grow. So here you see the investment numbers, and this data ends in 2020. I think, Mari, we have data for 2021 and 22. So you can ask us later about the 22 numbers, or you can just check out the startupestonia.ee website. I'm sure they have the numbers there. Invest in Estonia. So investinestonia.ee or startupestonia.ee. You'll see the numbers for 21 and 22. But each year is basically a record year. So I'm pretty sure this year we already have more investments. So the number of investments is 75 and 44 million in 2020. So a few of the initiatives that the community took to help prove that there is demand for startups. One was called the Estonian Startup Database. So this was a very simple project, just to map out every single Estonian startup, all right, their field of action, whether they are B2B, B2C. And then the most important thing, and this is kind of, we're bragging about this coming from Estonia, and for us, it's kind of easy to get access to this data because a lot of it is open data, meaning that anyone can publicly connect and get information, was the number of employees that the companies have and how much they were paying in employment taxes and how much was their turnover. This is possible because the tax information of each company is open. So I can know how much Bolt is paying in taxes. I know how many employees Bolt has in Estonia. I can just go to the tax office and freely ask this information. So based on that, we build a database, and you can see, this is also what helps to, build this narrative that the government should be paying attention to this sector because it is a driver of growth to the economy, and therefore you should have legislation that supports the sector from an investment point of view, from an employment point of view, from attracting foreign talent. If you're talking of a country of 1.4 million, there's not enough software developers, I guarantee you that. So a lot of it has to be talking to the government about which initiatives they can do from a legislation point of view to attract people to work there and attract investment. And you can only do that if you show them the numbers, if you show them that there's a reason to invest in this because it is driving the growth. So having this database was super, super helpful. Any questions about the database?
No one?
One question?
Oh yeah, thank you. Alan Okello from Tukole. This is really interesting. I've tried over the last 5 years. I do a lot of policy advocacy for the solar sector in Uganda, and we've been trying to build something similar, not even on a platform, but on Excel. And our government is really interested in taxes paid on profits. So I'm interested why that you prioritized turnover instead of something
That's a
like
great
that.
question.
Yeah.
That's a great question. You have to understand that the tax system in each country is different. And in Estonia, you do not pay taxes on profits.
Yeah.
You pay taxes on dividends.
Yeah.
So if the profits remain within the company, you can reinvest those profits so you don't have to take the money out. If you do take the money out, then you pay taxes on the dividends. So you pay taxes on money leaving the company. So we don't focus on the taxes on profits. But I think in your case, it could be one example that you could use. Yeah, there was a question there.
I just wanted to know who pushed the initiative. Was it a collective of startups? Was it the government?
So it wasn't the government, I guarantee you that.
Actually, this one I can, do you know how it got started or not? Actually, this one I can speak myself because, first of all, before Startup Estonia got money, there was a lot of lobbying for this to even get started. So then they got some government money, but this database, they started putting together basically on their own. Like this gentleman right here said on an Excel, there was nothing fancy behind it. But because the Estonian tax system is it's quite transparent, it's easy to get that data, right? But it started really as an initiative of people working on an Excel.
Yeah, I think
with no crazy funding or no project writing or just really someone's personal initiative.
Yeah, it was basically the ecosystem players. So it was a lot of the VCs or some of the more active angels that wanted to put it together, some of the organizations working with startups and just putting this information together, starting with an Excel and then moving it to a live database. Yeah, so there's also a specific definition. I think yesterday we also had a question about the Startup Act, and there was a question about, what is an SME or what is a startup, right? So this also helped when there was a definition about what constitutes a startup to help guide the policy discussion within government. So a lot of it was about being technology-based, innovative, global growth potential, scalable business model, and repeatable business model. It still leaves a ton of ground for questions about, is this a startup? Is this not a startup? But at least it narrows down the focus a little bit. and it's easier for the government to understand what kind of policies they're making to address these companies. But I think this is an important discussion to have based also on what you guys were talking yesterday about the Startup Act here. So I don't know if this one is probably also out of date, but yeah, on the terms of unicorns, we already talked about this. Skype being one of the first ones, Playtech, TransferWise, Bolt, Pipedrive. You might recognize this. Verif is already a unicorn, and Monese, I'm not sure if they're not there yet, but they're on the way. Anyway, lots of unicorns. The other thing we did, or that the community did, is very similar to the exercise we were doing yesterday. And I remember, I don't know which group was talking about it. I think
Actually, I'm gonna like just interrupt. Like from the previous one, from the first one that we did in Kenya, in Nairobi. No, no, no,
yeah,
go back to the slide. That was actually like Joan, who's not here at the moment, from Banjia. She built a pretty similar pipeline.
So you remember the exercise we were doing yesterday, right? The mapping of the startups and the ecosystem. So that's kind of a proto version of what this is, right? And again, this was the community doing it on itself. And I saw yesterday, there was one group at the end when they were doing these solutions that they said one thing we need to do is map the ecosystem. Well, this is what also in Estonia they did. They started mapping the ecosystem, creating a startup mindset as being the first phase. Remember, there was also some people talking about, why people going to startups. So startup mindset, pre-startup, startup, and scale up. And there's no talk of exit, but it kind of follows a little bit the same path. And then you talk about mentoring and events. So who is doing mentoring and events? Incubators and accelerators. Which ones are the incubators and accelerators? Co-working communities for the different areas, and then funding. Who is doing funding at the different stages? And you see Garage 48 is here, and I don't see us anywhere. And for example, Startup Wise Guys is here, and I think they might be somewhere else. But you see the different players throughout the ecosystem, and this is very, very useful for the startups because they know who to go to, but also for the community and for the government to know who is doing what on the community.
And that particular one was like a result of one day workshop where the Estonian startup ecosystem players came together, and we just that was like basically one of the results, like in a similar exercises we do here. So
yeah, someone just took the time to design it
Yeah.
nicely. What else? So the legislative environment is clear. This is super important. There is funding, and the startup ecosystem is good. All right, so maybe then some of the other initiatives that we talked about to tackle the lack of people. And I know, Mari, maybe you want to talk about the startup visa?
no,
No, okay. So one thing was the Estonian startup visa, which was an initiative to help bring foreign talent in without needing a traditional work visa. So I mean, already Estonia already benefits from being inside the EU. So any other EU citizen can freely come in to work. But if you're talking about recruiting tech talent, usually you would go to Ukraine, Belarus, maybe India. And to get those people to come in, it was kind of difficult to bring them because they needed to be super good specialists. And it was not an easy visa process. So what the community did is come up with a startup visa to attract tech talent to work in existing startups or to attract foreign founders to come in and start their own companies. And the good thing about this second part, the people coming in to start their companies in the country, was that if you look at the visa application process and the decision-making process of that visa, it was not your typical visa application where the police and border guard is looking through your application and all of that. There was a community-driven committee of other startups and investors that were looking at your application and kind of making a decision based on your business plan. So if you had a good idea for a startup, you would come in, and it's almost like the country is investing on you. The country is your first investor, and they say, this guy is good, we want to bring them to the country. So the committee that decides on these visas is not government, the police and the border guard. It's the startup community deciding we want to take this guy into our country. So it's a very different type of approach, I would say. I don't know, any questions about the startup visa? No? One question? Yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering, thank you very much for the insights. I was wondering if you could probably shed some light on how the conversation went, especially with government. 'Cause you're basically saying you're taking, or you want to take away the responsibility to check people. That's how they would look at it. So
Yeah.
how did that go?
Yeah. Again, I think, Mari, you were involved in the process, no?
I actually don't know how it got started, to be honest. I think it was also like part of the Startup Estonia's lobbying, or quite a bit of it. And then they formed like a board, which seemed credible enough, right? That could assess whether whether it is a startup that's worth like bringing to our country or not. But on the other side of the token, like for instance, something which I think Estonia still doesn't do very well is like if I want to hire a startup, then the same old people, police and border guard, they are assessing whether you are a startup or not. And then there's like a second thing that makes hiring for startups hard. The salary threshold is quite high, but that's different from the startup visa. That's just if you want to hire foreigners or like foreign talent as startups. That's still not very easy and it's expensive.
If you don't use the startup visa. If you use the startup visa, then those requirements are not there.
Yes, if you come as a startup, then and if you pass like this board of like who will judge over you, right? Then you're good. But then if you want to hire as a startup, then hiring foreigners is still not very easy for Estonia.
Yeah, there's a question in the back. And I just wanted to mention while we wait for the microphone that one of those foreign founders that came in is actually the latest unicorn that we have in Estonia. So we already see foreign founders coming into Estonia and starting very successful startups. Yeah.
Right. I just wanted to ask, what is the cost implication on a founder to establish a startup in Estonia?
So for a founder to start a company in Estonia, starting a company in Estonia in general is a very, very low bureaucracy process. So you
And
can
it's
act-
300 euros or
Yeah,
less.
so it's 300 euros. So it doesn't really have that high costs. You do have the starting capital requirements, which is 2,500 euros, but you don't necessarily need to put the money into the company. And they're actually dropping that requirement. I think it's from the end of this year. So 300 euros is the fees that you pay for the government to start the company, and the whole process is online. You don't need to visit anyone. You can just log into a website, enter your ID card, or your mobile ID, and then you can do the whole process once you have that. There's one question there.
Good morning, everyone. The Estonian country is the first to ever have a virtual parliament. I just need to know what impact has that had on the Estonian people? How effective has it been, and how do you go about it?
You mean virtual parliament?
Yes, like the parliamentarians don't meet in a parliament. Yeah,
I think they still meet in a physical location. Like
Okay.
there's still a house, they still meet there. I think during the Corona crisis, there were a lot more virtual meetings. And I think the only way that that functions is when you have indeed a digital society where, you know, every citizen has an ID card with their identity digitized. So you can do a lot of the processes that you would do physically, you can do them online. And that facilitates that. I don't want to go into much detail about it, but we can have a conversation over coffee. But just one thing that they've done as well is to make the country resilient to any foreign invasion, which is a very sensitive topic right now because of the whole thing in Ukraine and with Russia. But if needed, all of the land registry, the parliament itself, all of the government systems, there is a backup server and a way to keep the country running, even if physically the country is occupied. So there is a way that all the government keeps working, even if you're not physically able to do that. So there's backup servers. I think it's in different embassies throughout Europe. I don't want to disclose which embassies for security reasons, but it's quite resilient. Let's put it that way. So just quickly, the startup visa, very successful. A lot of people have moved there. Top countries, Russia, maybe not so much now, but Iran, Turkey, and India. And for employees, Brazil, India, Russia, and Ukraine. There's information on how to apply for the startup visa. I think we're going to share this presentation with you, but you can also just check the Startup Estonia website. And what else did we want to talk about? Yes, another thing that was very important that the startup community did was to have a complete web page of model legal documents. So a lot of times when starting a company, I think we were having this discussion yesterday at dinner about the founders agreements, the initial agreement between founders, the starting, the first term sheet. The whole point of it is to allow people outside of Estonia to have access to the digital platform that was created for Estonian citizens to operate their business, in this case, to operate their businesses remotely. So for any company that, or any entrepreneur that wants to start a business in Europe, they can apply for this e-residency and become an e-resident of Estonia. So that doesn't give you any travel rights. It doesn't give you access to Schengen or to live in Estonia or in the European Union. But what it does give you is the opportunity to start a company in Europe, open a bank account in Estonia, which means you can start a business and operate it legally from Europe. So with a very low bureaucracy, easy to understand taxes, and access to the markets there. The way to do it is that you need to be verified in person, and I think the nearest pickup point is South Africa, if I'm not mistaken. I don't think they have anything else at the moment in Europe. Use the microphone.
Yeah, South Africa is the first one they opened late last year, and I think they have already documents being picked up, because the thing is that you have to physically pick it up. Everything else you can do online, but you have to pick it up physically. Do you have to apply physically as well?
I
think you might.
The application I don't think needs to be.
But yeah, they have already had quite a few e-residents through South Africa, but because of the COVID, things have been slower, but they're hoping for the things to speed up.
Yeah, and that's it. I don't know if you guys have any questions about the e-residency.
Take a picture.
Do you have any questions about the e-residency?
What perks does it give you? Did you
One question.
talk?
From the Estonian perspective, how is this beneficial for the country to have the?
How is this beneficial for the country? This is
To
very
have
beneficial
e-residency.
for the country because it increases the tax base. So it's a very small country. Not a lot of people are having babies. So the population growth is very minimal. And this attracts companies to start their companies there. It attracts entrepreneurs to start their business in Estonia, right? So it increases the tax base. If some talented African entrepreneur wants to start a business in Europe, they would then choose Estonia as a place to start their business. And then, of course, if there are taxes to be paid, not necessarily on employment, but maybe other taxes, or eventually maybe even on unemployment, they would be paid in Estonia. And if you're considering opening a company and you do it in Estonia, like we mentioned before, there's only taxes on dividends, not on profit. So if there's profit, the profit can remain in the company, being reinvested into the business to grow the business, and then you would only pay taxes on the money once it leaves, so on the dividends. It's very popular with solo entrepreneurs and businesses that want to operate from Estonia. And I think they've also commissioned a few studies from some of the consultancies to see what is the impact of e-residency and how much taxes are now being, or how much revenue is being created for the government based on e-residency companies. So all in all, it's a success. Yeah.
I'm very interested in like setting up a company in Estonia based on what you've just been talking about, and I need to know something here.
Sure.
When you speak of less bureaucracy,
Yes.
could you expound on that a little bit? Like,
Yes.
what are some of the bureaucracies that you guys have done away with
Yes.
so that you can attract like business?
All right. So
startups
just
here?
very simply, because I don't want to dwell too much on this, but very simply,
Okay.
in most cases, you do not have to visit any government office. Number one, everything is online. You can do all government interaction from behind your computer. You don't have to sit and wait behind the queue anywhere, anytime. If the government already has information about you in one of their databases, you do not need to insert your personal information any other time. The different systems communicate with each other. Starting a company, as we said, once you have the e-residency, you'll get a card with a chip. This is how you interact. So you put the card inside the computer, and then it knows that it's you. And once you start, if you want to start the company, like Mari was saying, it's 300 euro that you pay as a fee, but you start the company online. And then the company is legally started. And then you can open a bank account, which for some of the banks, you can do it with a virtual visit. Some others, you still need to physically visit the bank, which is a bit of an issue if you need to travel to Estonia.
But you need a European bank for that, right?
Uh,
That's where the WISE and everything comes
yes.
in, right?
Yes.
That's the question. So a lot of the teams that we've had from the hackathon, they've used WISE for this.
And then, so this is just on the broker side. Then if you talk about taxes, if you don't have, for example, VAT, then you only report taxes once a year. And again, it's all online, and you should have an accountant that is certified to do this for you. But the cost of submitting this is also quite low. It's maybe 100, 150 euros. If you do have VAT, then you need to report it on a monthly basis, but you either can do it yourself, again, everything online, or you hire an accountant for maybe 50 euros a month. So bureaucracy in that sense, it's very, very
And your
streamlined.
personal yearly taxes, like just having the States experience personally, the yearly taxes, to submit them, it takes like 2 minutes,
Yeah,
honestly.
something like that.
I don't
So-
even look at it because it's all pre-calculated, haven't been cheated. It's all there, black and white. You just have to submit. So this is really, like, I think the paperwork really is easy as long as you have a working ID. Then everything else is
There was
smooth.
a question over there.
Thank you. Listening to this whole conversation, it takes me back to some of the discussions we had yesterday. For example, all this, how does it affect one of the key questions we were talking about here about nationality and and stuff like that. Do you have any rules, any policies that prescribe your actions as an
So can you expand on that? And do we have any policy?
Yes. Yeah. Stuff like,
Is it on the investment or on the founding of the team?
both.
Both. So on
Um,
the founding of the team, absolutely not.
Okay.
I mean, I think the country as a general perhaps has quota numbers of how many people can come in, but this
Okay.
is where the startup visa bypasses that,
Mm,
right? So if let's say there's a quota, how many Turkish citizens might come in?
Yeah.
If you come with a startup visa, that's a different quota system because you're coming not just as a worker, but you're coming to start a business, right? So I don't think there's a
although, if I'm coming to start a business, like my friend was saying there, would I be required to take on a national as a partner, or can I do it alone?
No, you don't need to have a national as a
Oh,
partner. No,
okay.
no, and especially if you do it from an e-residency point of view, where you don't even need to physically
Be there.
be there, right?
Okay.
So there's no need to
And-
have a
and-
local
and does
partner.
that affect me repatriating my profits and stuff like that?
The profits that are generated on the company that is established in Estonia, yes. And if you want to move that money out, then you probably take dividends on which you would have to pay 21%.
Okay.
So actually, the tax, I forgot to mention, the gentleman in the back was talking about the bureaucracy. The tax system is super simple, flat 21%.
On everything.
There's no, variable. There's no sliding scale. It's flat 21%. Everyone pays the same, and that's on me as an individual or a company. It's 21% for everyone, which is not too low, but it's simple and understandable. Any more questions? There was one more question. There's one there, and then let's move on to the actual community here.
Yeah, thank you. So I think my question was just wanted to know if you charging the capital gain taxes, good that you have mentioned you charge up to 10%. So how do you charge? Do you charge after profit or before? How do you charge? What's the modality?
Again, if you have profit at the end of the year, you pay 0 taxes. 0. If you have a profit at the end of the year, 0% taxes. The money stays in the company. Okay? So if you have, your goods cost you 50K, and at the end of the year you charge 100K, your profit is 50K. Of that 50K, you pay 0, because if the money stays in the company for next year, for you to grow the business, you don't pay any taxes at all. The only time you pay tax, so this is taxes on profit, 0. Good? If you take the 50K that was left at the end of the year and you want to take some of it to the founders, all right, the shareholders, if you take some of the money out of the company into your own pockets as a way of, making a living, then you would pay 21% of, 20% of that as taxes. All right? So that's not tax on profit, that's tax on dividend. It's a slightly different concept.
What happens if you're selling the company? You also, if you put the money in your pocket, you have to pay tax. So if you sell it, right? It's basically the same.
Yes.
You're gonna take the money out, you have to pay taxes.
All right. Any more questions about Estonia re-residency? You can connect with me or Mari through the breaks. This was just a small intro and inspiration. I think some of the initiatives that were done there could be useful. Not all of them are applicable, of course, but you can see how some of them were initiatives coming out of the startup community. So, are you guys ready to work?
Yes.
That was not a lot of energy. I need to see more energy. Are you guys ready to work now? Yes. All right. So the first session we're going to do is about the ecosystem that we have in your countries, and about think of your organization, think about the role your organization has in the ecosystem, and let's think a little bit about the problems that you as an organization or the organizations in your ecosystem are facing. So how we're going to do this? I'm going to give you a little bit of time to do individual reflection, okay? And again, for the individual reflections, use the paper, use the Post-its, whatever you want. And then we're going to use, again, one of these walls, one of these glass walls, and we're going to come out with a wall of problems, all right? So we're going to have different problems being mapped out. We're going to put the problems on the wall. And then after we have all the problems on the wall, you need to look at the problems that were described. And if you connect with any of them, if you see, oh, damn, that's also a problem that I have, then you will take ownership of this problem and you will join the people who have the same problem in the same table and discuss solutions for this problem. Does that make sense? So in the beginning, it's just individual reflection. Not everybody needs to come out and say, I want to talk about this. But if there's a topic that you're super passionate about and you want to do something about with the people you have here, then say, I would like to spend today discussing this issue, because I think this is an important issue for me, and I think it's an issue that I would like to get the feedback of the intelligent minds that we've gathered here from the whole region. Okay? So first is just a bit of individual reflection, and then I'll guide you through the second stage where you are going to take ownership and say, I want to discuss this topic. Who wants to discuss this topic with me? The topic goes on the wall, and then we'll see the people who want to discuss it. All right? So let's give you maybe 3 to 4 minutes of individual reflection. Just think about what topics you think are important for you that you would like to get feedback from the community, and then we take ownership and put them on the wall. So 3 to 5 minutes, let's go with individual reflection. All right. So, guys, can you hear me okay? Yeah? So I hope you had enough time to do a little bit of individual reflection. So what we need to do now is that each table should have a bunch of these A4 sheets. Do you all have A4 sheets on your table? Yes? So just like we did yesterday, on each sheet, I want to see written in kind of bold, big letters, the topic that is very important to you. Okay? You were doing a little bit of reflection individually. You have probably a lot of topics that you'd like to discuss, but I want to see I want you to I want to see that you pick one topic. And again, not everybody needs to have a topic, right? Because we only have 11 tables, we have limited time. So not all topics are that relevant. And a lot of people are going to probably have the same topic, which is fine. But what I need you to see is that you're going to write down a topic that is very dear to you, that you feel very passionate about, and you feel so passionate about this topic that you want to do something about it, meaning that it's not something someone else should solve, but it's something that I want to take a part in solving, all right? So write down the topic in the paper that you want to lead that discussion, okay? You want to take a leading role in facilitating that discussion. So again, not everybody needs to do it. If you just want to listen into the other topics, that's fine. Not everybody needs to facilitate because we don't have enough space for everyone. But if there's topics that you're passionate about, use the markers, use the black markers, and write down the topic that you're passionate about. And once you've done that, let me know, and we'll start putting it on the wall, all right? So let's start writing, and then when you have something, just raise your paper, and I'll come to you, or you can come to me. So is there anyone already with a topic written? Yeah, I have as well. But super, yeah. That's good, thanks. I think for now we're good. Let's see if they write. Do you have one already? What is it? Stand up. Come up here. So guys, if you have a topic that you are passionate about and you want to discuss, please bring it to the front. Yeah, tell what it is about.
Okay.
So guys, listen.
Yes. Good morning, everyone. Yeah, my name is Alan Ananura. I'm from iVenture Africa. We're a startup accelerator, and we do this in communities like refugee settlements, universities, corporate groups, etc., etc. I'm super passionate about investor readiness because most and many a startup will say, we don't have funding, but are you investor ready in the first place? So the systems that attract the type of funding that you want to get is something that is pivotal for any organization to have, and something that you probably need to pay critical attention to.
Yeah. Of course. I mean, I hope that, as you will see, there will be many topics written down, and I hope that you find something that connects with you, that you see, oh, that's the one that I want to talk with. That's the table that I want to join. If at the end of all of the topics you don't find anything that's relevant, right, then you probably need to come up with your own topic, right? And this is also, just to clarify, this is also one of those things where you being the bright minds that we have here, you will get a chance to vote on the important topics with your feet. So you will join the tables of the topics that you find important. And if there's someone who comes here with a topic about, I don't know, the lack of toilet paper in the bathrooms, like completely irrelevant, then if no one votes, if no one goes to that table, I think it's a signal that maybe this is not an important topic, right? So we have the first one. Who had the second one? You had the second one? Guys, if you have just line up here, and then it's a little bit more fast. Yeah.
Hi, good morning. Our topic is changing the face of business publication through digital marketing and business directories. So the reason we're focusing on this is realize that there are very many businesses that are actually stuck in between MVP because they are not getting out to the right market. Or even where we live in a regular life, you may not know where to find a product or a service, and yet it's actually within your community. Yeah. So how do we then maximize the opportunity of digital marketing to identify and reach out to products and services that are actually within our community? Yeah.
All right. So let me just clarify. So is this something that you as an organization are facing, or that your teams are facing?
This is something that my organization is solving.
This is the second topic. Thank you. And now the third one.
Thank you very much. The topic we have has got to do with making services for startups affordable. A lot of times, startups do not look for support and help because they can't afford. And therefore, they end up actually into all sorts of problems and trouble. So for me, the question is, okay, how do we make this affordable? Yeah.
Very good. All right. Thank you very much. Next one.
The problem I
And guys, during the presentation, try to listen because we're opening spaces for some who wanna work with.
the problem I see is cross-community partnership. I guess in Nairobi, the biggest problem is accelerators compete; they don't partner. For example, we are the lead for Techstars in Kenya, or rather in Nairobi. And until Techstars talks to Microsoft US on our behalf, Microsoft in Kenya won't do anything to support the local ecosystem. And it's the same across other innovation hubs. I run an event, instead of other innovation hubs coming to support, they want to run concurrent events, and it becomes very
All right, so
problematic.
cross-community partnership. Thank you very much.
Good morning. For me, it's the quality of startups. I've run programs, incubation and acceleration programs, both in Somalia and Kenya. And what I've realized is like, I know like if each ESO right now is given like $1 million to invest in the next 3 weeks, and I give you a criteria for the startups that I want you to invest that 1 million, you will not get them. I assure you 100%. So, and I don't know where it's actually arising from, whether it's the training or whether it's like, you know, like the tech hubs and the innovation hubs themselves need maybe like, you know, like for them to be trained, or is it the startups that need